Hello, my name is Leighton Quinton. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at OSG. And today's topic for our webinar is understanding your return on investment from digital transformation. So this is great for anyone who's considering a digital transformation activity or has indeed already commenced on an activity involving digital transformation and wants to understand the returns on their investment. There are a number of different approaches, at least two approaches to this, and so I'd encourage everyone to attend the full webinar to understand the different options available. And your questions we will take at the end of the presentation. So you'll see a little Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. So please do use that to submit any questions, and we'll go through that with our speakers at the end. At the end of the webinar, you'll see a very short 6-question survey. It'll take literally a minute or two to complete, and we'd very much appreciate that. That will help us shape our webinars in the new year, in 2021. And if you want to have copies of the webinar materials or wish to speak further with any of the speakers at the end of the event, just let me know. You'll receive an email with my contact details, and you'll also see that in the messaging. So just moving on to today's speakers. It's a global presentation today. So from Dubai, we have Vaibhav, who's an MBA graduate with over 12 years of experience in market research and analytics, including Kantar and Genpact Absolute Data. And Vaibhav has experience across a wide variety of sectors, including CPG, retail, banking, medical devices, pharma, and automotive, and driving things like innovation, pricing, understanding pricing, helping launch new products, and targeting and segmenting customers. We also have from Switzerland, Corinne, who's a psychology graduate with over 20 years experience in market research in various roles. She was an innovation specialist, managing director of several business units. And Corinne's focus is on ensuring that successful collaboration between our clients so that our technology solutions are most suited exactly to their needs and requirements in the different engagements that we do. So Corinne, I'll hand over to you to start the webinar and get into it. And as I say, if anyone's any questions, please do just submit them at the bottom of the screen. Thank you.
So thank you, Leighton. Thanks, everybody, for joining. So as Leighton mentioned, I'm Corinne Does. I'm based in Bern in Switzerland. I'm really excited to be able to share this moment with you. Before we get started, I want to discuss a little bit more about OSG and what we do, as you may not be fully aware of what OSG does. So OSG is a behavioral and data analytics company. Everything we do is centered around the customer. We use our technologies and our proprietary methodologies to get to the heart of what really matters to customers and understand how and why they make the decisions that they do. And because we understand what matters to the individual, we're able to do several different tasks. We're able to help with needs-based segmentation. We're able to help with better pricing strategies based on values, better messaging that resonates at individual level, and better innovation, co-creating with the end users. Ultimately, what OSG does and allows is for you to intervene at critical points in that customer journey to predict future behavior. So what we can help with is provide the appropriate influence to steer behavior in the desired direction. So how does this relate to understanding the ROI for your digital transformation? This is what we're going to go through now. So if we could move on to the next slide, please, Vaibhav. Thank you. So there is a lot of information out there about the positive impact of digital transformation. A recent article produced by a management consultant firm highlights that the more digitally mature company is, they can be as much as 3 times more likely to be successful and report annual net revenue growth and higher than average profit margins. There is clear evidence that brick and mortar outlets who connect the in-store experience with the app and online customer experience improve revenue for offerings and enhance omnichannel customer experience. So for examples, we have companies such as B Brand, which closed all the remaining brick and mortar stores back in 2018. At the end of 2017, they had only about 5 stores left and lots of debt. So what they did is that they closed all these stores and then they focused solely on digital and branded app shopping. This led to really significant turnaround and growth in their trading results. The shopping apps are really cutting edge, and the investment in technology to track and profile the customers is really powerful and produce exemplary customer experience, delivering ever-growing presence on the market for them. On the other hand, we have the recent example of Arcadia in the UK going to administration, sadly, and causing the collapse of many high street household names and the potential loss of 13,000 jobs. The impact of the shop closure during COVID is certain, there's no doubt about that. But the group's brand has been suffering from years of underinvestment before the COVID pandemic and had failed to keep up with the switch to online selling and digital marketing. So these are two very different and opposite cases where we see that digital transformation is essential in retaining some part of the market. During COVID, this has become even more essential, and we've had many brands, whether CGPs or medtech or pharmaceuticals that have contacted us. They wanted to reprioritize obviously their digital transformation, and that became number one. So we have been doing a lot of work in the last year, helping those companies develop a very solid digital transformation strategy. Over to you, Barbara.
Thank you, Corinne. So I guess, as we talk about digital transformation, digital strategy that organizations adopt, right? The biggest question is what is the return of investment that you could expect, and how can you identify the impact, right? So practically there are 2 major approaches that we're going to talk about today. It largely depends upon, at what stage are you, or at what stage is your organization at when it comes to digital transformation or digital strategy for that matter. If you're someone who's already invested into certain platforms, into certain digital transformation work, let's say a couple of years ago, a few years ago, then the way you would approach an ROI would be slightly different than, let's say, someone who's starting that digital strategy journey at this point in time. So what we classify, or what we call as the 2 different approaches, which is campaign lens and the consumer lens, are the 2 approaches which are to kind of help identify those return on investments on your investments, depending on what stage are you at. Now, if an organization has already invested into certain digital strategy, certain digital transformation work, and I think the key there is, you need to be able to define your success metric. What is that success metric? Is it revenues? Is it volumes? Is it, if it's a service industry, is it conversions? It is number of leads? So it could be anything. So once you define those success metric, right, and you capture, you measure and record all of that particular data on the success metric, as well as other key factors that would impact your digital transformation work, or your digital strategy work. It is important that we measure and record all of that data for that particular period. Once you have that data available, you could get into a more advanced analytics modeling way of estimating the impact or the magnitude of impact, and then getting to a return of investments on the in on the transformation that you've already done in the market or in the country. Whereas on the other hand, if you're someone who's literally starting that particular journey where you're still figuring out in terms of your digital strategy where to invest and where can I get most out of my investment dollar, then what we recommend as a second approach is more of a consumer lens. Now, consumer lens largely talks about uh, where are consumers spending time on? What are those key digital channels, key digital touch points which influence their behavior in terms of the purchase behavior or preference behavior or customer experience? So again, any of those success metric, depending on which industry you belong to, it is important for us to kind of map that journey, identify what touch points exist, and in a very unified way, and then look at what that impact of each of those touch points would be on the end success metric, right? So that's more from a consumer lens. Now we will go through each of these two approaches in a bit, but just to kind of detail out the first approach, which is the campaign lens, right? So largely there are three different steps that ideally this work would happen, right? The first one is more, I mean, when you talk about any sort of a campaign or any sort of digital investment that you've done or transformation across channels, across platforms, you may have invested into building an app, building a platform, certain tools, social media, could be anything. While you do that, since you've already invested into it in the campaign lens work, it is important, and you're recording those success metrics, it is important to within that particular data, it is important to isolate the impact which is under the scanner right now, or impact of the digital strategy or the digital platform or digital transformation which is under the scanner right now. There are a lot of different factors or attributes that impact your overall success metric. It could be if it's more like revenues and volumes and profitability, it could be your GDP, your macroeconomic factors, GDP, your taxes, your any legal restrictions that might come in at a country level. All of those factors can impact your efforts. Now, it is important for us to identify those impacts, isolate them from the data, so that the data that you have of the success metric is representing the campaign or the transformation work that we're looking at currently. So once that isolation happens, you can utilize that data to kind of quantify the impact or identify, first of all, to identify whether there is an impact, one, positive, negative. Secondly, what is the magnitude of the impact? And that's where the quantification part comes in. The third step is more from an ROI perspective, which is not a very alien subject. I think we all work in an environment where ROI is measured for each and every investment that an organization makes. But it is important for us to know that it's not just about the increment in your success metric, which I would use this term a lot, which is value creation. It is also about value extraction, which is, if you invest into a digital strategy and a digital transformation or a product or tool, uh, there are always certain aspects where, in terms of cost savings that happens, right? So we need to be careful, and we need to be cognizant of the fact that we do look at value extraction as well, along with value creation, to be really estimating the ROI for those efforts. Now, we'll go through each of these steps a little more in detail. Won't get too technical, but just to give you an idea in terms of how it's done and how typically we've done this across industries, not just CPG. It's been done across retail, financial services, medtech, different areas. So the impact isolation, which is really the first step, right? Once you have, as I said, you identify those GDP, your macroeconomic factors, you isolate those impact from your data. You really, what you do is you create two different sample groups within your data, right? It could be your customers, it could be your trade, it could be anything. Once you create these two samples or these two groups, what we like to call more as a control and a test group, right? Test group is someone who's exposed to your campaign or to your digital efforts, whereas control group is chosen in a way where it is not exposed to your efforts. Now, once you have these two groups, which are identical in terms of all the other factors, in terms of the size, in terms of the demographics, firmographics, whatever those factors are, once they are, they're equal, they're similar, and you have isolated these two groups and you've identified them, you can literally look at and see the impact that any other campaigns, because at any given time there are multiple campaigns that you might be executing, right? So you could use a very simple logic model to identify what impact does each of these campaigns have, right? That's again a part of isolation, wherein you do not want a collective impact being attributed to only the campaign that we are looking at currently, right? So to really be able to kind of isolate that. The second step is more on the quantification, right? So because you do have these two groups, you could test group is basically where they are exposed to your campaign, they are exposed to your digital efforts. You can build a time series model, based on the control data or the control group data to really predict what the future sales or future success metric would look like on a monthly level, on a weekly level. You could use that data to get a there are multiple ways where you can build a time series model, Serimax, Verimax. I'm not going to get into that, but you could create multiple iterations to see which model fits the best and where your error margin are the lowest, right? Once you've identified and built that particular model, you can use that model on your test data to see which is, by the way, a group which is exposed to your digital efforts, to see if that digital efforts were not exposed, keeping everything same, what would those numbers look like? What would those future predictions look like? And you already have an actual data there. So the differential between those two is basically the impact that your digital efforts have created. Now you can quantify that impact, by looking at the total differential for the time period of the campaign or the effort, and from there, once you've quantified it, you could move on to the third step, which is your ROI estimation, wherein you look at both value creation and value extraction, as I just said a while ago, to really get to the true ROI of your investments that you've made. So that's one way of looking at the ROI or estimating the ROI, to really understand, have your investment dollars onto the digital transformation paid off, right? Now this is at a scenario where you've already invested into it. You have certain digital efforts live going on to impact your customers, to impact your trade, to impact any of your stakeholders in your business. The other side is more where you're just embarking on this particular journey, right? And that's where the consumer lens comes in. So I'll pass it on back to Karan, for the consumer lens part. Karan. Karan, you're on mute.
Yes, sorry about that. There we go. Back on. So thank you, Vaibhav. Yes, and so as a first step, it is important for us to identify all the touch points that a customer goes through. So you have channels for purchase, which is at the end of the journey. But before that, you have several touch points that influence the journey to those channels. So we need to identify any traction and touch points for all the social media that we have. I just recently found a list of the 21 most popular social media sites around. Some are well known, such as Facebook, WhatsApp, YouTube, Messenger, Insta, Tumblr, etc. WeChat, Qzone, and QQ in China, but also lesser known, such as Line, Telegram, and Medium, which are all potential vectors for your brand. So how do you know where your customer spend most of the time? And how do you know which ones are the right fit for your brand? It's not just about the size of the social media, it's also whether the social media site is right fit for your business. So through the observation of your customer's journey, you can identify any traction and touch point for all the social media available and where it is most relevant for you to intervene. The ability to map the customer journey for each of these touch points is very important, since once you're able to map this touch point and match the path to purchase using marketing attribution, we can really understand which of those touch points have an influence and what level of influence each touch point has on the actual purchase or on the brand or the actual value added to the brand. Once you've identified that impact, you can go back and do the ROI calculation for an assessment of the investment it would require. For example, approach each of these touch points to be present for your customer at the right place. In addition, you can assess what savings you are able to make, as you would certainly reduce some of our campaign costs or initiatives that are being less fruitful. And furthermore, you can also understand what is the value creation that happened for your brand would come from, and that would come from the attribution model. Once you have that, you can review the ROI over a particular time period. So that could be 6 months or maybe for a year, and what you expect for your brand as a return on investment. Next slide, please. So as we've discussed, each of these touch points form a journey. And as you can see from the slide, the journey can be fairly complex and incorporate many interactions, whether offline or online, actually, before leading to a purchase. Here is an example of a path to purchase that we have conducted for our leading brands of mouthwash, including interaction both online and offline that can include also at the pharmacy, and we're able to capture all this information. So you have a channel for purchase, and you have all the touch points that influence that journey along those channels that are very important for you to map. Next slide, please. So how can you track all those different options? There's a lot of different techniques and approaches to customer journey mapping. At OSG, we utilize O360, which is the application that we have developed. It can record a whole lot of touchpoint data throughout the customer journey. The way it works is we typically recruit a community of customers, and then we start they download the app to all the computer, the apps, the telephone, all the devices. And then we can track recordings of all the omnichannel interaction each member of the community makes. This huge data footprint is captured and used using advanced AI and analytics presented in a real-time dashboard. Specifically, through the online interaction, we're able to capture the complex customer journey, the data footprint, including the application activity, the visits to reviews and advice site, the online searches, social media activity, and even how they behave on competitor websites or interact with competitor ad messaging. Whilst the users are online, it's even possible to capture their mood and emotions through facial recognition and using audio capture, ask them to provide a running commentary of their frustrations or delights while undertaking the online activity. So this, coupled with the survey data on the experience of each point at each point of the journey, paints a very complete picture of the customer journey experience, and with using advanced analytics, provides a detailed understanding, attributing to the importance of each channel and each touch point. Next slide, please. Here, you're able to see an example of some of the work we've done for a leading nappy brand, and see what it looks like in terms of data on our side that we're able to capture. We can match the full journey through the discovery period, the research on products, the impression, reviewing reviews of the product, for example, or talking on various social media sites, comparisons that can be done on competitive sites, for example, and finally, the sites where which is used for the final purchase. We've done some of this work for various CPG companies, and we've done that for example, nicotine replacement therapy, the Nappy brand I mentioned, also some pharmaceutical products and insurance products too. Next slide, please. Vaba, this is your time now for the attribution model.
Sure. So I guess, I mean, what Corinne said is, what we do with O360 is to kind of map touch points, which is a moment of truth, across the, path to purchase or across consumer journey or customer journey. Now, when you map all of these touch points from a consumer lens, some of these touch points are related to some of these digital touch points are related to the channel of purchase, right? Some of these touch points are more influencer touch points, wherein they're gathering information. It's more about the research that helps build that consideration before the purchase. So there are different types and different categories of touch points that a consumer would go through while they make their purchase or while they make their purchase decision or kind of share their purchase behavior with us. It is important while we collect this data for us to, of course, there are multiple ways you can do an attribution model. There are multiple ways where, other data like Google Analytics or Facebook Analytics would give you, where, you have first click, last click attribution, marketing attribution, you have other as well. But, one of the ways where when we collect this data from a consumer lens is you could build a data-driven attribution model, which is largely a logic model, to really understand across these different categories, which can be your search engines or your websites that you visit, consumers or customers interact with, email campaigns, social media, display ads, actual purchase channels as well, like the one that you just saw in the video, which was Amazon, which would get classified as a purchase channel before they actually make their purchase, right? So because you have all of this data, you could build an attribution model at an overall level across these categories, where how much do each of these touch points, whether influencer one or the channel one, impact their purchase behavior, right? And result into a more quantified success metric, which here could be your actual dollar spent, or in certain other industries it could be certain other service industries, this could be customer experience, this could be conversions, leads, any of those metrics, right? Now, when you look at each of these categories, right, so there are different websites that you would come across, there are different touch points that you would come across. Whether it's your brand website, whether it's some other website, whether it's an information gathering website, by the government or any other sources, you do collect a lot of that data. So you can go even a level deeper, further into it, which is, if you talk about organic searches, right, what are those key websites that a consumer goes through that may influence their decision towards a particular brand or your brand or a competition brand, or a particular type of product or a category, right? So attribution could also be brought into that level to see where exactly do you need to be present, whether it's a channel, whether you need to invest in a channel, whether you need to invest in more spread out digital spend in terms of reaching out to your customers, whether it's an awareness consideration thing or whether it's a purchase channel thing. And it's usually a mix of each of those, right? So you really need to optimize your investments across all of these channels, and depending on which has the highest impact, you're able to kind of quantify that impact. And with that quantification, you could always go back and see, if I do invest X amount of dollar, what sort of returns would I get? Now that's more from a consumer lens. This is to help you make your decision your digital roadmaps, digital strategy roadmap as you embark on that journey, right? So where all would you need to invest if you're starting off right now? Is it channel? Is it a combination of channel and other touch points? So that's basically the consumer lens, and that's how attribution modeling would help you identify and prioritize your investments and optimize your investments. So that's that's basically the two approaches that we've talked about. Now, just to summarize what we discussed in today's webinar, right? So there are largely two approaches depending on where you are in the digital transformation, a roadmap or life stage. If you're someone who've already invested, you could take a more campaign lens, wherein if you do have availability of all of the data during the period and even prior to the period, you could build models which would predict and estimate and quantify the impact that your investment dollars have had on the market or on your success metric. If you're someone who's just starting that particular journey, then consumer lens to know where your customers or consumers are, uh, which touch points and which areas and which channels are they really getting influenced by on their part to purchase, becomes a very critical data for you to decide and optimize your investments while you embark on that digital strategy journey. So those are the two messages. OSG has done a lot of work across both these two approaches at for clients, as Corinne said, not just in CPG, but in retail, in financial sector, in medtech, pharma, across industries. So and OSG could help you with each of those. I mean, if there's anything more in detail that you want to know of either of those approaches, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to kind of dig deeper on it along with you. So with that, if there are any questions, we'll be open for them.
Thank you, Vaibhav. So yeah, we've got a few questions coming in. So first question is, I think it relates to one of the earlier slides. Could the logic be enlarged?
Sorry, could the logic model be enlarged?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that relates to one of the very early slides.
Correct. I mean, okay. I mean, I'm going to assume, because I don't know the thought process from which that particular question came in, but when we talk about isolating impacts across different campaigns, that's where we talk about logic model, where you could attribute, so it's more like a in a typical CPG framework, where we would build a market mix model wherein you have different factors playing in, like price, like distribution, like your GRP spends, all of those coming in, wherein it helps you build and estimate the impact each of them have had on your overall volume data or sales data, right? So that model can be utilized if you have more factors coming in as well. If that is what you meant when you said enlarge, to really identify, because if you restrict it to only few in a logic model, you do tend to get a constant, and if that constant is too huge, which basically means that you are missing out on certain aspects or certain key factors, which might impact more than what you're currently looking at. So yes, it can be enlarged the campaign side of things,
Thank you.
but then it has to be more pathway based.
Okay. Thank you, Vaibhav. Another question, and I think you might have touched on this, Vaibhav, actually at the beginning, but nevertheless, good question. Of the two approaches, if you're starting from scratch, what's the best one?
Well,
if you've got no preconceived idea about which approach to use.
Well, if you're starting from scratch, and which basically, the assumption here is that you would not have any data um, which could help you quantify the impact of different channels or different touch points would have, on your customers or consumers. then our recommendation would be more from a consumer lens, wherein we identify where your consumers are and where do they get influenced by, what are those key touch points, digital ones specifically. And then attribute that to the actual impact and quantify it and get you that particular ROI so that you could optimize your investments, right? So if you're starting with a blank sheet, I would suggest a consumer lens would probably be a more suitable way to go.
Okay. Good question. If I'm not in CPG, am I more likely to use the campaign lens approach?
Well, not really. We've utilized campaign lens approach within CPG as well. We've utilized that in retail as well. I mean, with the campaign lens, the underlying assumption is you do have data for your success metrics. You do have data for your digital transformation that you've done. Certain key factors which impact your success metric on it. So once if you have all of those data, then you could use a campaign lens. Even in B2B scenario, that doesn't have to mean that if you're in a B2B scenario, if you're not CPG, you cannot use a consumer lens. You can. We've utilized that as Corinne said, I think in one of her slides, is we've utilized that in pharma. We've utilized that in medtech as well, which are largely B2B, sort of an environment.
Great. Just time for one more, I think. Corinne, I think this is probably one for you. How do we ensure that data security is adequate when using O360 and privacy? How do we ensure that?
So we have to remember that the participants are recruited for the purpose of the study. So they have to sign consent for everything. So they will be aware that we will be watching them and they will have given us consent. The data would be stored on clouds, which are all located in the actual country where the respondent is. So we have highly secure systems which are helping in keeping the security very high. So we have managed to go through various companies, very specific and difficult security measures. So we're quite confident that our system is very tight, including pharmaceuticals, where it's extremely important, of course.
Great, thank you. Okay, there's another question there, but I think we'll get back to that one separately. I'll share that with the speakers and we'll reply. I think just to let you know, the webinars for 2021 will be coming up quite soon. So I'll send you a link relating to that, just coming through. So you can see the link on the screen there, in fact. So at the end of this webinar, when you close out, you should see a short survey, and we'd really appreciate your views to help us shape our webinar program in 2021. And all that remains to me to say is thank you very much for attending today. If you would like to discuss the results of what you've seen today in a little more detail with either of our speakers, just do get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with our speakers. Yeah, so thank you very much for attending, and thank you to our speakers. So I'll just say goodbye from me, and I'll just pass it over to Vaibhav and Corinne as well to thank you and say goodbye.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Yes, thank you. And I can see that there are other questions, so we will definitely get an answer together and discuss that internally and send you an answer.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.